Hello all, Mr. Riley here to talk to you just a little bit about how the singing voice works. We're going to cover some important terms and parts of the vocal anatomy that make it all happen. First, a few parts of the process that are important for you to know. We'll start with inhalation, which is moving air into the lungs. Exhalation is moving air out of the lungs. Phonation is the process of producing sound from the vibration of the vocal folds or vocal cords. When we say vocal folds, we're talking about the same thing you may talk about with vocal cords, just two different names for the same thing. Resonation is the amplification and modification of sound produced in the larynx or the voice box as it may be known. And articulation is changing that sound into speech. We'll start with inhalation and exhalation. That process is controlled by a large muscle called the diaphragm. The diaphragm separates your chest cavity from your abdominal cavity right here along the bottom of your rib cage. And it sits like this. When the diaphragm contracts, it allows more space for the lungs to fill up that space and thus drawing air into your lungs. That's inhalation. Then when the diaphragm relaxes, it pushes back up and reduces that space and pushes air out of the lungs. So inhalation, the diaphragm contracts, and exhalation, the diaphragm relaxes. There are other muscles involved with breathing around your rib cage called the intercostals that are all over the place. They're involved as well, but not as much as the diaphragm. Those are inside and outside of the rib cage. Our next part of the process is phonation. And all sound begins with vibration. There's an example of somebody singing and those vibrating vocal cords, vocal folds down in the bottom there. That is a scope going up through someone's nose down the back of their throat to where they can get a look at. We can get him to stop. A look at those vocal folds right there in the picture. Here's where they are in the anatomy. So the trachea is here. At the top of the trachea is the larynx or voice box, and the vocal cords or vocal folds sit right there, and they vibrate. The air moves between closed vocal folds, causing them to open and close rapidly, producing sound. Now, you may ask yourself, how rapidly do they open and close? Well, for an example, if you sing an A below, the A immediately below middle C, then your vocal folds are opening and closing approximately 220 times per second. The lower you sing, for example, this note, would be at about 110 vibrations per second. Higher, it gets higher. This one would be 440, and this one would be 880 times per second. So the higher you sing, the faster the vibrations are happening in your vocal folds in order for you to sing high or low. That is phonation. Next, we have resonation. If we just had that sound from our voice box, they tell us it would be some small buzzy-like sound. It would not sound very good. So we have to let that sound resonate, and it resonates inside the open spaces inside our head. All the open spaces contribute to resonation. The pharynx, which is this open space at the back of the throat here, the pharynx. You have the oral cavity, which is the empty space in your mouth, the nasal cavity up here, sinus cavities inside your head, and also to some extent your chest cavity because there's air there too. That vibration can go everywhere, and we use those structures in order to properly resonate and make our voices hopefully sound good for singing. After we resonate, the next step is articulation. And in articulation, let's move myself just a little bit to get out of the way. There are 19 different parts that can adjust the sound after it leaves the vocal folds. The primary ones we talk about here are the tongue, which as you see is right here. The soft palate, which is right here. The soft palate is here, the back part. This part would be the hard palate up here. It doesn't move. The soft palate moves. The teeth here and the lips are some of the parts that aid in articulation. Some of the other parts that are important to know you here, we talked about the pharynx already. Here's the vocal cords and the trachea. The epiglottis is right here, the flap that hopefully keeps food and beverages from going down your trachea, because then you choke. You want those going down your esophagus to your stomach. Your tongue is right here. We talked about the lips and teeth, the hard palate, the soft palate, and then your nasal cavity and sinus cavities are up here. So once you inhale, you begin the exhalation process. You phonate the sound, producing that initial vibration that creates sound. Your resonating chambers change the sound and make it resonate and make it louder and shape the sound. And then your articulators come in, and those are the things that make our basic vocal sound turn into words and sounds that we want to hear on the outside. I hope you picked up a few things on my very short video here about the process of singing. Make sure you review later. There will be a quiz. Thanks for coming. Bye.